The Prime Minister there responding just at the top of this hour to a call from Quebec's Premier to reduce the number of asylum seekers coming into that province. François Legault says the ability to support those seeking asylum is nearing a, quote, breaking point. And the feds, as you heard there, aren't really fighting back. Indeed, Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc also replied on social media to that request, saying Ottawa is taking Quebec's concerns seriously. What to make of that response? And the pressure point the feds face on immigration more largely right now? Let's bring in our front bench. Joining me this evening, former BC Premier Christy Clark. She's a senior advisor with Bennett Jones. Former Toronto Mayor John Tory is here, as is former NDP leader Tom Mulcair. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Tom, I'll start with you because you're coming to us from Quebec. The concern from the Premier there is not a new one. Certainly, it comes post the deal with the United States that had been thought to reduce the number of asylum seekers, but the Premier is highlighting what's happening at airports. Is this a legitimate concern in your view, or is it also about kind of distracting from his own political pressure points in the province of Quebec at the moment?
There are those political pressure points in Quebec, no question, Vassy, you're right about that. But at the same time, Legault is pointing to something that is obvious. And it's the same thing that Mayor Olivia Chow pointed to recently. It's that the costs are not being borne by the level of government that's responsible. It's the federal order of government that has the prime responsibility here. Quebec has about 20% of the Canadian population has been systematically receiving more than 50% of the asylum seekers. Quebec provides welfare as a last resort. The feds are having trouble delivering work permits. A lot of these people would love nothing more than to be able to work, but that's gummed up in the works of the departments in Ottawa as well. There are more than 1,000 classrooms with the kids from those waves who are learning French, but it's an additional expense. These are expenses in terms of the availability of housing. The price of a two-bedroom apartment in Montreal is just skyrocketing, even though we have pretty decent rent control in the province of Quebec. It's just the pressure is so huge right now. So is Legault also at the same time playing a political game because he's in a shouting match right now with the Parti Québécois, which is resurgent? Yes, that's part of the process. But at the same time, it's a very legitimate concern. The costs, very well established, proven, are well over $450 million to Quebec so far. And the feds, what was interesting today to me, watching Dominic LeBlanc coming in and saying, okay, right, we're going to talk about this, which is a very different answer than what the Trudeau Liberals, especially their backbenchers in Toronto, were giving to Olivia Chow. They were ready to have a fight with her about this. So it seems that they're starting to recognize that they do have that responsibility.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the response, and we heard from the Prime Minister there, Christy, which kind of echoed what Minister LeBlanc said on social media as well, was like not we're up for a fight. We'll do any. It was more like we'll talk about this. We get it. We get it. Is that reflective of exactly what we convened to talk about a week ago, which is how much the immigration file is, a bit of an Achilles heel to them right now when it comes to the larger issue of affordability?
I think so. I think for the first time we're starting to see them seeming to listen. That's great. But this is a very real issue, not just a political issue. It's a real issue in Canada for everybody. As Tom said, I mean, the pressure on classrooms, on healthcare, on housing costs, those are the things that Canadians are thinking about right now. We've had almost a million new immigrants come in over the last couple of years. That's a huge number of people to try and accommodate within a system that isn't growing, which our healthcare isn't. Feds haven't added a bunch of money to healthcare, housing, and social services and welfare in provinces. So, I think the federal government has been really derelict in its duty in making sure that immigrants are settled and have what they need in order to be able to fit into communities and function well in those communities. That is their job, as Tom said. They've been derelict in doing that job. But remember, though, too, there's one of the reasons that we're seeing so many new asylum seekers come in at airports in Quebec is because the federal government has turned off the tap at Wrexham Road in Montreal. So people are just finding another way in. But when the federal government also went at the same time and said, we are going to we're going to change the whole temporary visitor visa program so that we're not really going to ask you when you have to leave anymore. It meant that they opened a new door for asylum seekers coming into Canada that they don't control. This is a problem of their own making. So not only did they create the problem, with the changes to the temporary visitor visa system. But they also then aren't looking after people when they get here. It's a legitimate concern for Canadians. I'm a big supporter of immigration, but immigrants need to be supported when they arrive, and we need to make sure that communities are ready to welcome them.
Yeah, the point around the visas, for example, was part of what Premier Legault wrote in his letter to the Prime Minister, that the closing of Roxham Road, for example, had helped John, but that the influx through the airports was kind of returning to exacerbate the issue. To be fair to the feds, they haven't done nothing. I mean, there have been large transfers to both Toronto and to the province of Quebec to help welcome. I think the point that both of those jurisdictions are making is it hasn't been commensurate with the level of immigration through that pathway, through basically asylum seekers. It hasn't matched the need.
That is absolutely correct. And the timing has been off. And that's the part that's the greatest mystery to me. I mean, this was an issue throughout the time I was mayor, which is the last 8 years. And finally, I think maybe in the second year, 2016, they actually did start to flow some money after we sort of said, and I said it quietly to them because I said, look, you don't want refugees, which we have a proud history of dealing with in this country, to become a polarizing issue. We don't want that to happen. And they agreed with that. And they flowed some money. But every year, it was flowed late. It took long. You never understood when they were going to do it each year, because they did it for many years, why it took so long. And this year's the greatest mystery of all, because when the pressure is as great as it's ever been, in fact, much greater, I think out of the 10,000 people that are sheltered in Toronto right now as we speak, 5,000 of them are refugees. So that's 50%, which is the highest it's ever been. It was around 30 when I was mayor.
It's six today, they said.
Yeah, and they are arriving at the airport now because they're not coming as much down Highway 401 from Montreal from having crossed at Roxham Road. So the mystery to me is why a check they've written every year for the last number of years, they're being so slow to write now, letting this build up into a boiling cauldron, when in fact the principle they've established a long time ago is that they will support this. They should be doing some other things like setting up transition centers where they can, when I say process, they can help the refugees to find places other than the biggest cities to go to, because there are places where they could be housed and where there are jobs, and they're not doing that either. But the money is the biggest mystery because it's not a precedent. They've done it before.
And they have set up some centers in some instances, but again, Tom, I think the issue is that it's not commensurate with the level of asylum seekers that are coming in. More broadly speaking and politically speaking, immigration is going to be one of the big things that they're talking about. It feels like over the past 2 weeks at this cabinet retreat coming up that it has skyrocketed in importance. Do you anticipate a tangible announcement from the feds on this file?
What a great question again, Vassy, because if we go back to last summer's tragic retreat of it, bringing everybody out to Prince Edward Island, holding the press conference and saying precisely nothing. Canadians were scratching their heads saying, well, this was your chance, the big reset, and you delivered bupkis. And so what are you going to come up with this time? This is a perfect example of something concrete that can be done. Yes, I think that's exactly it.